Good afternoon, and it's such a pleasure to be here. I see well-known, friendly faces, and anything organized by Umeed, I definitely feel I need to be here. So thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to meet the Umeed team, which I think embodies all that we wish for our children and families. I'll start with dedicating this to my families and to all the people who work with special needs, because I think you need some special qualities to work with children with special needs. I wish to, as you heard, I've retired from NIMHANS, but NIMHANS has been a part of me for years. And these are the setup, this is the setup in NIMHANS. This is the Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Department. This is the Child Psychiatry Inpatient Center. And this is the Adolescent Psychiatry Inpatient Center. So this place has 40 beds where we admit a child with the parents, with the caregiver. So when we talk about family-centered stuff here, for us, it has been nothing but family-centered. We can't think of anything other than family-centered. And so this has always been the way it has been, that we will take the child with the family. Definitely one parent. Even the adolescent, we definitely want the parent. If it is a state-sponsored candidate as coming from the juvenile justice system or something like that, even there, from the home in which the child lives, the state home, will come somebody, a guard or a nurse or an aide or somebody. But no child stays alone in this setup. This is the interior of the wards. We have many things happening here, including a classroom kind of setup where the parent also takes part. Then we have a whole program. I won't go into it. I just was tempted to do this because I wanted to show you that the family is the center for us, and there's no other way. So when we talk about family, and I'm talking about only about developmental disabilities, for us, family is all these. Family is such a blessing. And all of us who see children through the juvenile justice system, that is care and protection, or through children in conflict with law, we understand how terribly, terribly important a family is. And therefore, for us, I think this is our great fountain of hope as far as our children go. So briefly, I'll just run you through this. Factors predicting better adaptation. We heard yesterday, and somebody spoke about it, that compared to other parents of disability, with children with disability, parents who have child with an autism seem to have more trouble, and these are some of the kinds of things that favor better adaptation. I won't go into them in detail. And that's what I said. In contrast to other types of disabilities, parents of children with autism appear to be at a greater risk for depression, anxiety, social isolation, fatigue, frustration, and so on. So what's the major issue? The long and frustrating process of obtaining a diagnosis. It's very difficult. All of us have agreed that by the time a child comes in for a diagnosis of a developmental disability, it's a very long time, and they've gone through a lot of trouble. The other thing, all of it is very much better these days, but it hasn't been that great. So we did a small bit of work in which we looked at, and as you can see here, the study was done with 61 mothers and 59 fathers. So fathers also came in. We tried to make it a point that when the child has a developmental disability, we'll make it a point to try and get the father into our ward. We have an outpatient program, we have an inpatient program as well. But in the outpatient program, a father may not be able to be there all the time. But sometime during the course of their stay, father will have to come. At times, and nowadays especially, a lot of fathers do come along for the admission. Our aim is, it's a training to the parent. If the parents don't do it together, father has a tendency to say, you went there, so you know what to do, so do it. And then the poor mother has another supervisor in the father of the father. So we don't want that. We want the father to understand that fully. So we have a lot of them, and that is what we found in our small study. Burnout, vast majority of parents, they cope very well. but for those for whom services are unavailable. And one of the ways we get to know about burnout is when we talk to the families, and all families with developmental disorders, we will go through this, which is, tell us from morning till evening what happens to your child on a school day or on a holiday. And so they will start with, he wakes up at 6 o'clock. So where does he wake up? With whom has he slept? Who wakes him up? What happens after he wakes up? So the mother or father can pour their heart out, and we know nothing, so we have to listen to what's happening to that child. So here you have a mother who's able to tell you all the details, and you will get to know who did what, with whom, where, and when, and for how long. So straight away in your mind, you have got this idea of what you have to plan to do for this child, no matter what diagnosis you give, because you know that developmental disorder is equal to early intervention. Even before a diagnosis final is made, you have already started giving intervention. And so we believe response to intervention, RTI, is an absolute necessity. We tell young people, you forget about the diagnosis. It's a process. Don't simply go and blurt out that your child has got A, B, and C. No. Find out what are the deficits, what are the assets. You finished your first consultation, they already have some take-home to do. They already have some intervention started, so they know work has begun. You're not going to wait for that final day where you're going to seat them and tell them the whole story. So burnout can be an issue, and you can make out about burnout as they are telling you this story of how difficult life has been for them. Now, if this condition persists, after all these things have done, we do pay attention. The family gets some counseling, some psychotherapy, and all of us who work here know that we have burnt our fingers. You can't talk about parental needs unless you have attended to the child's needs. We have had young residents being grumbled at by a wise parent who says, I came for my child, not for my problems, just pay attention to my child. So you know that the talk has been just too soon for the parents' needs to be met. There's something more to be done for the child. Resilience. And we wanted to talk about resilience. So there are a group of invulnerable parents. And these group of parents are healthy, competent, resilient persons who, despite an environment that is stressful to the extreme, are able to manage. And this is what I have found over the years. That the level of knowledge of some of our parents are far in excess to what our residents have. So one of the things when we talk with the developmental disabilities to our residents, we say, you will occasionally meet a parent who knows much more than you. So your omnipresent, omnipotent thing that you learned in MBBS no longer holds because you are a novice. Agree with them that you got to learn. They will give them websites, they will give them books to read, they will tell them what they must do. And very insulting for a resident who thinks he's got a place in the sun, which is the most important thing. So we kind of cut them down to size and say, I'm giving you a parent who already knows a lot. So I want you to do this much and learn from the parent. So we find that there are parents who are big on this and who take it upon themselves to learn about these. Now, over the years, we have found that this group of invulnerable parents are increasing. And one of the ways in which they increase is they learn. And the other thing that they also do is that they work in groups. And they take parent support groups. And I find certain groups imbibing in their parents things that I hadn't seen them do. So I would make it a point to get parents into parent support groups. Many people don't agree, especially in the early days of the diagnosis, in the early months of the diagnosis, when denial is a big issue, they don't want anything to do with these parents. But you can see it dawns upon them, and then they will seek it. The other thing that we don't pay enough attention is about the sibling. And I believe siblings can be big sources of help, but lots of times siblings become other kinds of parents. They are parentalized. I see young children who are 8 years old and the little child with autism is 4 years, and mama will say, look after this, so why did you let him run? And this poor 8-year-old child actually wants to play with the toy I've given the 4-year-old. And so, but he has to keep his hands like that and watch over the 4-year-old. And oftentimes you will find that mom hasn't thought about the needs of that young person. So in our work, we spend time talking to the kid, also talking to the parent about protecting time for that child, protecting time for the well child. I'm sure some of you have read this. This is about a parent's journey. It's called the Duloc Diaries. You all can go through it. This is about a poem written by this lady who was a special needs parent who describes her parenting journey as being like getting excited over a vacation in Italy. No offense meant to neither Italy nor Holland here. There, the vacation to Italy were parenting expectations, only to find that she had landed permanently in the quaint country of Holland. That is the reality of special needs parenting. It's very well written and definitely tells a story how beautiful an adventure special needs parenting can be. But this mother says, and yet I hate it, and I do. You must read it as to why she would hate it. So in that poem, she ends by saying, but if you were to spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy the very special, the very lovely things about Holland. And this parent talks about how this helped her go through this journey about parental expectations and parental reality, and talks about that even parents of so-called typical children are always have to face reality. This wasn't what you thought. That wasn't what you thought. You got something different. And here too, you got something different. In my discussions with parents, this is what I generally have been doing over the years. Once you have got to know the parents adequately, and once you have spent time with the family and they know you're very interested, I spend a lot of times talking about marital bonds. I believe that having neurotypical children is a strain on the marriage. I don't know whether you will agree, but I'm talking about the marital bond, that it is a strain on the marital bond, typical children. Having a child with special needs is much more demanding. And if the marital bond is not strong enough, it simply lets the two parties go asunder. They remain together because it's necessary, and they think it's, of course, their child and they care for the child, but the bond in between is not there. So we often have this discussion when I've known them well enough as to when was the last time they went for a movie together. When was the last time they left their child with somebody for even an hour and went out together? And I was talking about this in a conference in Pune, and I met a neurosurgeon who told me he deals with children with CP. He says, I go a step further. I tell them that I'm writing in my follow-up notes that I'm going to ask you, which was the movie you went? And if you don't go, I'll book your tickets and let you go. So he said, and I agree with him, that it's important for the family to know that if you want to look after your child with special needs, well, nurture this bond. The happier you are in this bond, the greater chances are that you will plan things and do things differently and have more energy rather than having trouble with each other. I spend a lot of time with that, and a lot of parents say, ma'am, we have stopped thinking of ourselves. It's been a long, long time since we have done anything for ourselves. Planning another child is also another issue. We may even get the grandfather in because we think the grandfather is the most important member of the family, or that he's funding or he has the finances with him. Then we'll have the grandfather in. The reason we do that, we wouldn't do that for example, separation anxiety, or even for a child with, say, anxiety symptoms. We wouldn't do that. I'm talking about a non-developmental. 2 more minutes. Thanks a lot. Yes. So, but we would do it for a child with developmental disability because this is a lifelong plan. Everybody has to think of this as something that is a long future, including finances, including making a will. Somebody has to remember this child when they make the will. The grandfather who's controlling the money can't hold the parents responsible for having a child like this. So we would like to sort that out with the grandfather. Parents as co-therapists, lots have been written about parents as co-therapists. And I won't talk about it, but number 3 talks about parents as co-therapists. Are we straining the parents? Are we troubling the parents? Are we heaping more things for them to do? Not much of work has been done about how much of a strain this is for parents, because we don't have resources in the community. We allow parents, we ask parents to do this. So we are making them do this. So that's an additional responsibility for them. But I think parents as co-therapists are the best things that we can do. Yeah, there's a minute. Okay. Some points that will help with the well-being. I believe that if parents have to think of the family's well-being, it is necessary that they must take a life cycle approach, an approach which takes them through the life. What will my child do 10 years later? I must plan it now. What is the leisure time activity my kid needs to have? What kind of pre-vocational job? I need to plan it now, something to be started just now. Attention to sexual issues, legal issues, financial issues. Advocacy was something I wish to talk about. Preparing parents to be advocates. I think all of us who work with parents, somewhere along the way, we have to prepare them and coach them to be advocates. It doesn't come naturally. For some it does, but otherwise it doesn't. In conclusions, I wish to say this. I'm surprised at how much parents can do. Surprised. I always tell my students, never underestimate the power of what a parent can do. I'm always surprised of how neglectful sometimes they are, but invariably that is because of mental health issues in the parents themselves, and that has to be attended to. I would like to end by saying that everybody has a place in the sun, according to the theory of aerodynamics, and as may be demonstrated by laboratory tests and wind tunnel experiments, the bumblebee is unable to fly. This is because the size, weight, shape of his body in relation to the total wing spread makes flying impossible. But the bumblebee, being ignorant of these profound scientific truths, goes ahead and flies anyway and manages to make a little honey every day. So thanks a lot for your patience here.